Welcome to the Occupational Safety Leadership Podcast, episode number 49, Training for Process Safety Management. Let's get started. So, in episode 48, what we sat down and covered were the operating procedures. This one, episode number 49, we will sit down and talk about the training aspect. What we are working from is process safety management. CFR 1910.119. And I think this is also a very important aspect because as we sit down and do operating procedures, instructions, and SOPs, we also have to train people on those procedures. Even though this is like a really big section for process safety management, I use the same exact thing regardless of what the process is out there. We're doing a machine shop, whatever it happens to be, because it's just a really good way of operating. Because one of the things that we want to do with training, of course, is to obviously set the tone for safety, and we set the tone for what is and what is not acceptable behavior out there. I don't think anybody comes to work to get hurt, but we all know people show up with different motivations. Sometimes people are scared. Sometimes they're so focused on, I got to hurry up and do this, that they are willing to take shortcuts. So this is a very good spot where we can really sit down and just help people understand exactly what is expected of them. So let's talk about initial training then. So this is right from the CFR itself, so there's no original thought in this next sentence. Each employee involved in the process and new hires shall be trained before operating a newly assigned process. To me, that sounds like any time that you give anybody something new to go ahead and do, you sit down and train them first. You also want to look at who's doing the training. We like to think it's somebody who's been around for 30 years and they have all this knowledge and experience and all that, and not that they don't, but we also want to make sure that they don't have bad habits, bad attitudes, and everything else, and what they're doing is just giving it to that same exact next generation, those bad habits, that bad attitude, and everything else. So everything we can do to make sure we're giving people really good training up front is going to benefit us. So when we sit down and talk about the training, it then says you have to do a couple of things at least as an absolute minimum. You have to talk about the safety and health standards, safety and health hazards in the process, emergency operations during a shutdown, and of course that means a controlled shutdown as opposed to there's a out of control and you must just shut down the process as quick as you possibly can. Safe work practices. We talked about last episode. Safe work practices were things like a tag out, confined space. If you're going to open up a line, you're swapping a valve out, you're doing just how do you really go back and tackle this, protect yourself from any of the chemicals, and how do you go back and do this safely. Let's go on to the next slide here. Refresher training, got to do it at least every 3 years. I like to think that in that time that people have not picked up bad habits and they've started to bypass things and everything else. That's why I sit down and try and do just a little refresher every so often. Watch the guys, see how they're doing, and at times it can be super uncomfortable, of course, because you're not sure, are they doing it right because I'm watching, or are they doing it right because they always do it right and I just happen to be there, you know. So now one of the things it does say about refresher training is that the employer, in consultation with employees, shall determine the appropriate frequency of refresher training. So you can do refresher training at less than 3 years, but at an absolute minimum, you got to do it every 3 years. And let's talk about documentation. Anytime you train somebody, you got to get the employee name, the date you did it, and the means to verify the employee understood the training. There's a lot of I shouldn't say a lot of, there's more and more workplaces out there where English is not a first language. So you have to come up with a way that you can say they know enough English, or you could train in enough whatever language that you could say this is exactly how they understood it. And here's how I verified the means. I know that a lot of people are not a big fan of having a test, but I like to have a test to then say I transferred the knowledge, and here's the test to prove that they were able to absorb that knowledge, understand the training, and pass the test. And that is it for training. Episode number 49 is over. My name is Dr. David Ayers. Thank you for joining me today, and have a safe day.